and I first call Moitri Pundit, Assistant Professor, Sam Sundar College. The title of her paper is Rise of Domestic Violence Against Women During the COVID-19 Lockdown Period in India and Way Out. So I request Moitri Pundit to present your paper, and time limit is 6 minutes.
Mr.
Moitri Pundit, please. Moitri Pundit.
Subroto, you first ensured that all those in the list, in your list, at least 10 presented first, whether they are present or not, and then call accordingly.
Yes.
Because I could see some name, around 16 people have joined. And
Now, the total number of paper in this session is 12.
Okay, only 12 people, right?
Only 12 people. So just I call Moitri Pundit. Can you hear me, Moitri Pundit? Next, Mr. Priyaranjan Saha.
Yeah, Priyaranjan Shah is here.
Priyaranjan Saha.
Yes.
So, please you present your paper. Priyaranjan Saha, research scholar, Bardwan University.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And the title of his paper is Impact of COVID-19 on Women in India. Please present your paper. And time limit is 6 minutes.
First of all, thank you to the organizing committee for giving me the opportunity. Here present my respected VG sir and Professor Subroto Chatterjee. With the permission, today I going to discuss impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women in India. The COVID-19 outbreak is impacting society around the world in an unprecedented manner. As a developing country, our challenges are different. After 68 days of lockdown, India started unlocking 1.0, where some sectors are allowed to work conditionally. But during the pandemic, the women suffered the most of three counts. Those are economic field, domestic environment, and personal health. Economic field, 118 million women workers are engaged in the unorganized sector in India. Such a huge proportion of women workers have no job security and they work with low wages. According to World Bank, a large number of those women have lost their job due to the pandemic situation. Domestic environment. For the pandemic situation, women suffers in various ways. It has been found that domestic, sexual, and gender-based violation increased during the pandemic. According to UN, domestic violence is also a global pandemic. 243 million of women between the age of 15 to 49 worldwide were subjected to sexual and physical violence by an intimate partner in the last 12 months. Recent data released by National and Legal Service Authority suggests that the nationwide lockdown has led to a rapid increase in cases in domestic violence. Domestic violence has often been studied as an abuse expression triggered by the financial stress, mental stress, fear, and of course, systematic patriarchy. The data, which is categorized according to the cases in different states, suggests that Uttarakhand recorded the highest number of domestic violent cases in last 2 months of lockdown. Haryana ranks on the 2 and the national capital Delhi on number 3. Women in Telangana had to face a spike in domestic violence too. The report by National and Legal Service Authority documents cases from the start of the lockdown till May 15 and was collected through 28 state legal services. Some shocking numbers were revealed in the report, which mentioned that the total of 144 cases of domestic violence were reported in Uttarakhand. From Haryana, the number of cases 79 and total of 69 cases surfaced from Delhi. The sense of isolation and financial and medical anxiety coming along with the deeply pandemic and sinking economy have increased the frequency of violence. Although the number of crimes against women has always been underreported, so it's a very serious problem for the country like us. So here needs to be most powerful initiative taken by the feminist movement in India. Effort have intensified in recent months to fight two pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic that threatened lives and economic pandemic that threatened the livelihood of millions of women workers particularly. But much less attention has been paid to the third pandemic, that is increasing sexual violence against women. According to the National Commission for Women, during the first week of national lockdown, the complaints of rape, attempt rape, have raised sharply from 2 to 13. However, many activists believe that those cases may only be a tip of the iceberg, as many women will not able to reach out because the restriction on movement as well as lack of privacy within home. There is evidence that in situation of crisis or calamity, there is an increase in gender-based violence, particularly against women. There is a lot of anxiety in people's mind, uncertainty where they will find a job, whether there will be pay cuts. There are hardships such as increasing foods. In a particular society like us, men find women easy targets for venting their anger, and the other hand, alcoholic husband beating their wives at home are on the rise is very sharp way. In that way, Indian National Family Health Survey report reveals that close to 42% of men agree that husband is justified in hitting or beating
Mr.
his wife.
Mr. Saha, 1 minute left. 1 minute only.
It is okay. It is then not surprising that a third of Indian women have experienced some of the physical, emotional, sexual violence in their lifetime. Personal health. Under such a situation, women would mostly delay seeking medical help for their personal treatment. Unfortunately, as against the global trend, women are dying more in India. Those, according to a study conducted by the Institute of Economic Growth, New Delhi, the CFR among males in 2.9, while the female is 3.3% in India. On reason for this delay and denial of treatment for women, the issue of poor caloric intake by women is also a reason. Health issue like hypertension and depression as well as need for hospitalization during pregnancy make the situation more complicated. This will be a very long lockdown, and government must ensure resources to help women. Distress healthcare service for women and abortion are also included the essential service. It's the high time for civil society, NGO, social worker. They also should take responsibility for establishment of women rights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Priyo, for presenting a nice paper. I think there will be many more papers on violence-related issues.
Exactly.
So we would pick up question answer session. We would arrange question answer session later on, assembling 3-4 papers together. It's over to Shubhra.
Okay. Now I call Dr. Shatorupa Pal, Assistant Professor of Ashutosh College, Kolkata. The title of her paper is Impact of COVID-19 on Women, an Analysis. Please, Dr. Pal, please.
My paper is Impact of COVID-19 on Women, an Analysis. And this year, 2020, is the year when the Beijing Platform for Action celebrated its 25th anniversary. Despite all odds, women rights are violated and neglected all over the world. And during this situation, the COVID-19 pandemic all over the world, women rights are neglected and violated. Women are politically, economically, and in the societal aspect, they are discriminated and violated. COVID-19 pandemic discriminated women and men differently. And women are often the main caregivers in their homes, communities, and health facilities, which puts them at an increased risk of contracting COVID-19. In the UK, 77% of NHS workforce and the majority of informal carers are women. More broadly, an analysis of 104 countries revealed that women from 70% of workers in the health and social sectors and 50% of unpaid carers. At the same time, over 70% of CEO and the board chairs in the global health are men, while just 5% are women from low and middle income countries. Although many women are working on the COVID-19 front lines, women therefore have little say in the policy measures put in place to address this crisis. COVID-19 pandemic COVID-19 pandemic discriminated women in many ways, and we can say that violence against women is the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. During the lockdown period, women are stay at home in their quarantine situation. They are maintaining social distancing. At the same time, they are humiliated and subjugated by their male partners and by their husband. And at that very time, they are lost. They are excluded, financially excluded, as well as they are excluded by the gender. The effects of school closure of girls from the vulnerable background are also very much important at this pandemic situation. And the girls belonging from the very poor background, they are violated their educational rights. They are still poverty stricken at this very situation, and there are some policy recommendations are needed at this very pandemic situation. And unconditional cash transfer, I think, a very good policy recommendation for the women, and it makes them economically independent. They can start up their business, and government should take care for their unconditional cash transfer towards women, especially for the poor segments of the rural and urban areas. And impact of COVID-19 on women is very much important because it hampers the public and private sectors, and basically those women are engaged in the informal sector. They are unpaid, they are ill paid, and they are economically social stress are also very much emerge at this very situation. Their physical health and mental health also very much disturbed at this very time. And an inclusive economic model should be introduced at this very time. And the inclusive model where the unpaid domestic labor is subsidizing both public services and private profits. And this pandemic not only challenging the global health system, but our commitment to equality and human dignity also. And at this outset, we can say the politics of difference, that is that concept is elaborated by the Iris Marion Young, the celebrated feminist scholar, and who believes that women as a social group, politics of difference should be manifested here, where women assert their rights as a social group in front of unequal societal system, institutional framework. And so the time has come to women should be treated equally with the male counterparts. And to conclude, we can say for the sustainable development or sustaining women rights, procedural rules and inclusive treatment must be introduced for women for their equality with their male counterparts. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Shatarupa, for presenting a nice paper. For Subroto, Maitri Pandit has joined, so you may pass.
Yes.
So you may invite her.
So I request Maitri Pandit to present your paper.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Please. Please.
Sir, good morning, sir. Today, the title of my paper is Rise of Domestic Violence Against Women During the COVID-19 Lockdown Period in India and Way Out. Women have been suffering a tremendous problem of domestic violence during the entire lockdown period in India. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, has declared lockdown from 24th March 2020 for controlling the spread of COVID-19 disease in India. Since then, in the patriarchal social structure, cases of abuses and domestic violence against women, especially women of the marginal section, single women, and girl child, have been rising rapidly. Women have been suffering from insecurity and discriminations. Between the beginning of the March and 5th April, the National Commission for Women received 310 grievances of domestic violence and 885 complaints for other forms of violence against women, many of which are domestic in nature. In accordance to the NCW, it has received at about 587 complaints via email or via post from all over India from 23rd March to 16th April, and out of which 239 cases are related to domestic violence. This is because people locked in their abusers and may not be able to get access to a mobile phone or the space and time to call for help. In accordance to the chairperson of the National Commission for Women, Jayanti Patnaik, she said that it has reported a rise of 94% complaints cases where women have been abused in their homes during lockdown. The National Legal Services Authority has stated that during this lockdown period, Uttarakhand has recorded the highest number of domestic violences, and Haryana and Delhi followed Uttarakhand respectively. And in accordance to the chairman of the Women's Commission of West Bengal, Leena Gangopadhyay, she said that at about 70 cases of domestic violence has reported since the inception of the lockdown. According to the Express News, they have received 162 cases of crimes against women, including 38 complaints of domestic violence in this period. Now, actually, these cases of domestic violence like intimate partner violence, elder abuses, violence on women violate their basic human rights and disturb their mental health drastically. The girl child has been suffering abuses due to increase of stress, anxiety, financial crisis, job insecurity, etc. of their parents. In fact, during this lockdown period, they are trapped physically and mentally and cannot be able to escape from their abusers. After 40 days of lockdown, when restrictions were easing down and liquor shops were open first, women from different parts of India have been protesting against the decision of government and organized movements because in their view, consumption of liquor by their men is proportional to increase in incidences of abuses and domestic violences. Now, what are the solutions then? So we need a comprehensive strategy and nationwide campaign to promote awareness about domestic violence, women's rights through different news channels, radio channels, and social media platforms, and highlight the various modes through which they can file their complaints. Rather than that, the Government of India and various NGOs advise to the victims to keep relations with the close and trusted friends, family members, follow helplines of domestic violence free online and follow free online counseling websites and make strong protest against these vulnerable cases. Various NGOs have been working in providing safeguards to the vulnerable and abused women all over India. Among these NGOs, most active are like the Shakti Shalini of a Delhi-based NGO, the Shoyam, a women and child rights NGO in Kolkata, and the Vishaka in Rajasthan, which has been running several Shurakha Kendro for the distressed women during this lockdown period in Rajasthan. So women should need to take self-care, manage their anger through creating supportive and friendly surroundings, meditation, and should need to learn how to take personal responsibility for one's physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and mental health. They should achieve empowerment and power of resistance against different forms of domestic violence and abuses. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Moitri, for presenting a nice paper. Subroto, the next presenter.
Yes. Now I call Dr. Nilina Ghosh, Associate Professor, South Calcutta Girls College. The title of her paper is Socio-Cultural Challenges of Post-COVID-19 Scenario. Please, Dr. Ghosh, present your paper.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, yes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you to the organizers. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, please continue.
Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. Okay. Yes, the whole world is in crisis. We regret about our blurred future, the uncertain present, and a treasured past. We are anxious about the pathetic picture of the world around about human existence. Actually, I have tried to analyze the situation from the perspective of the philosophy of existentialism. An important feature, important concept of existentialism is alienation. This alienation means the person, we are actually psychologically withdrawing from the society. We are feeling absolutely isolated from others. There's a feeling of loneliness. We are unhappy. As a result, we are suffering from different mental disorders like depression, stress. We are coming across millions of cases of domestic violence, suicide, murder, etc. It's a kind of estrangement. Another thing, a person also feels himself to be isolated from himself. His normal framework of belief system has crumbled down. He's like a foreigner to himself. The familiar world has turned into an unfamiliar world, a queer world. We are panic stricken and we are always anxious that the disaster may strike at any time to me or to my family, and I'll be quarantined at an unknown place for an indefinite period of time. I have selected certain keywords. Number 1 is isolation. Number 2, alienation. 3, lack of communication. 3, unpredictability. 5 is mistrust and fear of the unknown. I feel that in order to adjust ourselves to the new normal, or we can call it abnormal situation, the major areas of concern I have chosen, 1 is education, number 2 health and service, and number 3 is financial stability. Regarding education, I think that the government should concentrate on maintaining the proper infrastructure, particularly for the rural children, because they are deprived of education, and there is network problem, very poor network connectivity. Number 2, health and service, quality and quantity, both should be taken into account. We need the psychological counseling for all age groups, for the children, for the elders, the terminally ill people. Number 3, the financial stability. The pandemic has resulted in total breakdown of economy. Millions of people have lost their job. So we should create small pockets, so that particularly in rural India, so that people, mostly the children and the women, they get some means of earning their living. It will help them to make their both ends meet. And the next one, I think that we are always thinking of the new mantras. What are the new mantras? Stay home, maintain social distancing. So we need transformation and reconstruction of our thought. We have to build up a positive attitude towards life. We have to nurture the feeling of empathy. We have to explore new possibilities. We should understand that we can enjoy freedom, but only freedom in a restricted field. We need patience. We need responsibility both on the individual level and at the social level. Cooperation is necessary between the government and the citizens. And in the morning, Professor Rakesh Bhattogal said, he pointed out about the problem of this rural Swasth mission. What are the negative points? So overall, I wish to conclude my paper by saying that we should approach this situation with a positive view of mind. In following the Taoism, we can say that the Taoist philosophers say that disaster can occur at any time. So we have to be patient. A turbulent sea, after a certain time, it calms down. A forest fire, it also burns down. So we have to wait for the normal situation to come, or it's better to say a better situation to come. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nilima Ghosh, for presenting a philosophical view of the pandemic. We'll come back to all these issues later on. Subrata.
Yes. Now I call Mr. Kaushik Das, M.Ed student, University of Calcutta, to present your paper. The title of his paper is Did COVID Change Our Gender Perception? Mr. Kaushik Das.
Yes, sir.
Yes, please present your paper.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Good morning to all my respected listeners and eminent teachers. Today's topic is which I going to present in front of you, that is, did COVID change our gender perception? In our patriarchal society, women and men alike are accustomed to the same kind of thinking from an early age on behalf of the family. The concept of gender is one of them, which is the practical life, is reflected in words, deeds, and sometimes silently. In India, the term third gender has now taken the place of men and women, but how honorable, that is questionable. Gender inequality works regardless of rural or urban areas, education, economy, age, and class also. There have been several continuous lockdowns in India. However, considering the situation again, West Bengal going to walk the path of lockdown. Lockdown means staying at home again. In the last 3 months, many of us have had the strange feeling of being at home. In some cases, my misconceptions has changed. In some cases, mental state of the process of thinking is not the same. The human environment, the mold of socially accepted ideas, personal education, psychology, etc., play a big role in the field of thought. The formal busy life is now slow. It is a matter of concern for many to spend time again doubling the burden of someone's cause. The economy also plays an important role there because lifestyle depends on the economy. The respect of the person earning at home is differently. They are at other times basically instructing the work of the members of households, but now he spends more time at home doing office work and rest. The role of many men in the home has changed. It is especially noticeable and commendable. Again, there is unrest in many houses due to living together and because of distribution of household works. Someone is showing very anger to his wives. So there is need to some solutions which is according to psychologically and general interventions. In this present situation, psychological interventions and some general interventions will be more effective for avoiding gender stereotype and for mental health and for mental well-being. First, we can say that everyone needs to be educated, give proper sex education in schools. The family needs to have educated women. All members need to have a neutral attitude rather than gender inequality. Women need empowerment in leadership, in work, etc. We should have a neutral attitude towards the third gender person. Everyone has equal rights. It should be taught. Keep practicing to be kind. Inclusiveness is important for our society now. Two, uh, hello, am I audible, sir?
Yeah, audible, audible. Please continue.
Okay, okay, sir. Okay, sir. We are say that some psychological interventions is also that is cope with anxiety, adapting to the epidemic situation to keep yourself busy all the day helps to keep the body healthy. Soon with the professionals, if you feel bad mental health, contact. Patience to listen can be increased if there is unrest at home. Listen attentively. Next, try to rediscover yourself through work. Do not make a list of mistakes. It is now strictly forbidden to attack by providing evidence and preparing a list. The impact of anger hurts both. Rumination of unhealthy thoughts
Mr.
blinds
Das,
the
you
eyes of.
want
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
The eyes and head. So, if you take the initiative to make your partner feel better in a new way, that is to appreciated. Maintain a sense of kindness. The last one is focus on acquiring some personal development skills such as develop a growth mindset. Think, what do you do? Create a personal development plan. Next, you can take a challenge in some fun way such as reading some new jars books and doing new things, etc. At last, we say that post-traumatic stress disorder be converted into post-traumatic growth. Through this, we can control our life from anxiety, and the way of survival is hope. We can make the futures stronger by connecting with everyone socially. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kaushik, for joining. I think you were a student, so still long way to go to learn. And I believe at the end we'll be talking about different aspects which will be giving you further inputs to improvise upon your system. Okay, Subrata, next.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Now I request Dr. Madhumita Choudhury, Assistant Professor, Barakpur Rashtraguru Surendranath College, and Mrs. Roshana Khatun, Netaji Shatovarshiki Mahavidyalaya, Guest Lecturer. It is a joint paper. The title of their paper is Gender Dimension in Society During COVID-19 Pandemic. Who will present the paper?
Roshana Khatun.
Okay, please, Roshana Khatun. Please, continue.
Sir, I was presenting my paper.
Yes,
I cannot show my PPT.
yes. And the time is 6 minutes. Remember, the total time for presentation is allotted for every participant is 6 minutes.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
continue.
My paper name is Gender Dimension in Society During COVID-19 Pandemic. My paper, the COVID-19 pandemic disease outbreak is impacting societies in the world in an unprecedented manner. When we talk about how the pandemic affects particularly gender groups, will help raise the effectiveness of containment efforts and potential negative impacts. This research paper focuses on women and girls. Through mass media, analysis shows that they can be especially active actor for change, while they can also experience the efforts of the crisis in different and often more negative ways. During pandemic situation, women and girls have faced more violence in domestic situation, permanent education dropout rate increase, trafficking rate increase in migration situation. My project objective is to analyze the influence of pandemic situation in women and girls in the society. Second one is to assess the beneficiary and preferred form of media to inform about women's and girls' rights during pandemic. And third one is to evaluate how could handle this discriminated situation during pandemics through media gain advancement in public opinion about equal rights for women and girls. My research paper's methodology is quantitative research methods, and I was done some newspaper news and articles as my sampling. It was done by April to May 2020 during the pandemic situation. My project aim is gender interpretation during pandemic, health, education, economic, etc. situation of women and girls during the pandemic situation and the perspective of the society. Gender dimension in health. In India, Institute of Economic Growth in Delhi, in the Institute of Health Management Research in Jaipur and Harvard University in the US has shown that 3.3% of all women contracting the disease in the country are dying, while this rate is 2.9% for males. The difference in the status in the age group of 40 to 49 years were 3.2% of the infected women as compared to 2.1% males have succumbed to contagious disease, and also in the age group 5 to 19 years that has only seen female deaths. In COVID-19 mortality in India have been published in the Journal of Global Health Science and are based on COVID-19 mortalities in India till May 20, when the total confirmed cases were 112,027 with 3,433 deaths at a case fatality ratio of 3.1%. 73,654 males and 38,370 women were infected then, while 2,165 males and 1,268 females had lost their lives to the pandemics. Importantly, no infected male in the age group of 5 to 19 had died in India, where death rate in the age group among girls was 0.6%. At the no point should government think that women are at the advantage in dealing with the infections, and also the health and nutrition support program should be continued with enhanced focus even during the pandemic situation. Next one is gender dimension in education. Social and gender norms will...
Roshana Khatun, please conclude.
Okay. After the whole project, my conclusion is media and women and girls' rights are correlated in some extent in COVID-19 pandemic perspective. In some of newspaper like the Work, News India, New India News, India Today was shown that women are not in good situation during the pandemic situation. In education, dropout was increased. The smuggling and trafficking of women is women's rate is increased during the pandemic, and the child marriage also the increase. So if the government not recognize these things, it will be huge loss for the India to risk of the health risk or domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic in women and girls also. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Roshana. I'll come back to the issues that you have raised later on. Subhuto, you may invite the next speaker.
Yes. Next speaker is Dr. Papia Dev of Moinaguri College. I request Dr. Dev to present your paper. The title of her paper is Paradigm Shift in Teaching Learning Process in Post-COVID-19 Scenario. Please, Dr. Dev.
Good morning, everybody. Sir, due to poor connectivity issues in my area, can I stop my video and present my PPT here? Hello. Hello.
Speak.
Am I audible, sir? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are
Sir,
audible. Please continue.
Sir, due to poor connectivity issues in my area, can I stop my video and present my PPT here?
Okay.
Thank you.
And the total time is 6 minutes.
Okay, sir. No problem. Sir, my PPT is visible? Hello? Sir, my PPT is visible? Hello?
No.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Yes.
Yeah, start.
Yeah, please.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Sir, in this presentation, rather than focusing on facts and figures, I want to shed some lights on the ideological and philosophical aspects of how education is treated and delivered in this country. In my view, it is the variance of education that will benefit tremendously from a tectonic shift. However, there is a deeper strain, a mindset that has been passed on for generations that requires revisiting. And that is what I wish to focus on. Here in my PPT, I included some slides which are showing how paradigm shift in education system of India has taken place from the ancient period of time. Here are some glimpses of the changes. If you look at the back, we can see there was Gurukul system in ancient India, when education systems involves the teacher sitting and reciting and the children repeating the same. This method helps a person gain brain power. In traditional classroom, teacher explains within the four walls with chalk and duster and lecture mode. Generations of Indian students have committed these textbooks to memory and spewed this information on copious pages of examination answer sheets. The third phase is the insertion of smart classroom, where the concept of blended learning is blooming. It's thus the education system's responsibility to employ various technological opportunities for students' case. A smart classroom is that opportunity to provide students with qualification by helping them to understand the concepts better, improve their reading and comprehension skills, and achieve academic excellence. In this process of paradigm shift, what we have seen, here we get the concept of the flipped classroom, which is a pedagogical model in which the typical lecture and homework elements of a course are reversed. It is widely accepted that information and communication technology is used in every step of education. Moreover, ICT under pedagogical conditions can be one of the most important tools for educators and students to develop cognitive, social, and technological skills in order to be able to respond critically and creatively. It is time to go beyond the tools and chairs. The four walls, chalk and duster. COVID-19 has given us strong reasons and enough new situations to usher in this most needed renaissance in our education system. COVID-19 has forced educational institutions across India and the world indeed to suspend physical classrooms and shift to online classes. With the incorporation of technology into education, the main purpose is to change how teachers and students gather, access, analyze, present, and transmit information. Though many institutions have this privilege to have ready access to technology, trained teacher, and a fair policy environment, have already started this process long back. But after knowing the fact, the use of technology in many educational institutions was still low. One of the reasons behind this may be the pedagogical beliefs of the teachers in education. Today, in this pandemic situation, technologies used to improve and facilitate learning can be found everywhere. Leaving other contextual factors to the side, such as unequal access of the technological innovations and connected technologies across colleges, villages, and cities, we can only say that we have embraced technology in education when it is used for both teaching and learning. By integrating technology into education, educators aim to engender pedagogical change and address fundamental issues that affect learning, teaching, and social organization. Technology can therefore be seen as both a tool and a catalyst for change. But students have had to make far bigger adjustments. As learning has always been in classroom, which they can't go to now. Besides, many of them may not be that well equipped with technology tools to avail of remote learning. Their lockdown has accelerated adoption of digital technology. This is an ideal time to experiment and deploy new tools to make education delivery meaningful to students who can't go to campus. It is said that the collapse of education system is the collapse of nation. Because education is the driving force of economic and social growth of any state, it drives competitiveness and employment generation. So future of our nation is shaped in the classroom. Higher education should be viewed as a long. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Indian higher education system can address itself to the global challenges through maintaining the right balance between the need and the demand and channelizing teaching, research, and extension activities. We have to make a paradigm shift in our thinking and in our thinking and approach to education. Only then will we have something significant to offer to the world and reclaim our glorious past of being at the very forefront of innovation and discovery. For all this to be a reality, a drastic change in thought process is required in the mindset of policymakers, authorities, students, and especially educationists. All these steps will help strengthen the country's digital learning infrastructure in long run. COVID-19 has only accelerated adoption on technologies to deliver education. So that's all from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Papiya Dev, for your presentation. Now I invite Dr. Priyadarshini Ghosh, Assistant Professor of Moinaguri College, to present your paper. The title of your paper is Post-COVID Geopolitics, Reshaping of the World Order. Please, Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you, sir. Is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, is it visible? Please continue.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Respected Chair, Professor Vishwadeep Ghosh, Co-Chair, Dr. Chatterjee, and fellow participants. As the slide suggests, I shall be speaking on post-COVID geopolitics, reshaping of the world order. With hundreds of millions of people now isolating themselves around the world, the COVID-19 pandemic has become a truly global event. And while its geopolitical implications should be considered secondary to matters of health and safety, those implications may in the long run prove just consequential, especially when it comes to the United States and China's global position, because global orders have a tendency to change gradually at first and then all at once. Before I begin, let me sketch out a brief outline of my presentation. I shall be briefly talking about the scale of global backlash against China and how China is trying to soothe the rattled nerves, especially in Africa. Because of the paucity of time, I shall be focusing primarily on two geographical areas, that's Africa and US, and will finally wrap up with my concluding observations. Now, across the globe, backlash is building against China for its initial mishandling of the crisis that helped loose the coronavirus on the world, creating a deeply polarizing battle of narratives and setting back China's ambitions to fill the leadership vacuum left by the United States. And relations have ruptured at most unexpected from China and Africa. Never before have the two sides had such critical, high-profile, widespread clash of positions, let alone allowed it to erupt in front of the public. Now, regardless of how it started, it's now a full-blown international crisis that is rapidly escalating between China and a number of African countries. Not surprisingly, it has also become yet another talking point in the increasingly acrimonious US-China relationship. Now, these are some of the aspects of what China is doing to heal the wounded nerves in Africa. Beijing has already pumped up significant amount of cash in Africa, which is almost 20% of the external debt to the continent. The Jack Ma and Alibaba foundations have respectively sent around 1.1 million testing kits, 6 million masks as part of mass diplomacy, and 60,000 protective suits to the African states. Now, why am I focusing on China? If you look at this two pie chart, you would see that majority of China's foreign funds have been funneled towards Africa. It's 58% towards Africa, 42% towards Asia. Compared to that, India's African fund is only around, say, 5% or so. Now, what has this funding to Africa achieved for China? These are some of the examples. Now, with the support of African countries, China has defeated Taiwan's 14 attempts to re-enter the UN in the past 20 years. China has consistently used its veto in UNSC to block US-led efforts to impose sanctions on Sudan, and African countries supported China to defeat US's and other Western countries' 11 attempts to criticize China's human rights records over all the years. These are again some of the other instances. For example, South Africa has twice denied visa to Dalai Lama. African vote enabled China to select Sheng Feng, and also Dr. Tedros Adhanom, the current DG of the WHO, to be elected. Now, if we look back at the US-China relations, where relations between US and China has plunged to a nadir in the last recent weeks, and in April, the US has imposed visa restrictions on the Chinese journalists working in the country, limiting their work period to 20 days. President Trump has extended for one more year a ban on US companies from using telecom equipment made by companies like Huawei and ZTE. And the rising tensions between the superpowers have prompted many experts to warn of a new Cold War. And a rising chorus of American voices now argues that confronting China should become the organizing principle of US foreign policy, akin to the Cold War against Soviet Union. And COVID-19 seems to have aggravated the crisis, pushing both the countries already reeling under trade, technology, and maritime disputes to take a more hostile position towards each other. So in my concluding observations, I would like to say that record high temperatures have been recorded in Sino-US relations in recent years, and the pandemic is no exception to these. Competition rules the relationship, and flexibility, mature handling are in short supply on both sides. So uncertainty prevails, whether it on the question of resolving trade problems on the maritime front in the East and South China Sea, on technology, or mutual mudslinging on COVID-19 issues. The situation seems unlikely to ease until the US presidential elections are over, and therefore tensions will not go away. And I will end with a note of caution that the progress is not encouraging. If Trump gets re-elected, the ideological underpinnings of US-China rivalry could get further solidified. Thank you so much, and these are the references I have referred to for presenting my paper. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Priyadarshini, for presenting a very nice paper. It's informative and analytical too. I think we will come back to these issues later on. Subrata.
Yes. Now I request Shreya Ghosh, Assistant Teacher, Central Point School. The title of her paper is The Impact of COVID-19 on Migrant Workers in India. Dr. Shreya Ghosh, please. Shreya Ghosh, please continue.
Yes, Shreya, your slides are there. Why didn't you start talking?
Yes. Shreya Ghosh, please continue. Shreya Ghosh, please unmute your audio. Shreya Ghosh, please unmute your audio and continue. Next. Sir, can I say next one?
Sure, you call the next person. She will do it later on.
Okay. The next person is Shubesna Khadar, student, the University of Burdwan. The title of her paper is Subjectivity and Objectivity of Media Reporting During COVID Pandemic. Shubesna, please continue.
Hello, sir. Shudeshna here. This is a joint presentation with my friend, Miss Pritha Mishra. So shall we continue?
Who will present the paper?
Sir, both of us, we will speak simultaneously as according to our PPT presentation.
Okay.
With your permission, I would like to present my screen.
Okay. But remember, the total time for presentation is 6 to 7 minutes.
Yes, sir, we will remember. Yes, sir, of course.
Please continue. What happened?
Sorry, sir, for the technical problem.
Please continue.
Okay, sir, is it visible? Hello, is it visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, please start.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone present here. This is a joint presentation by me, Preeta Mishro and Sudeshna Khodar from the Department of Mass Communication, the University of Burdwan. And our topic is subjectivity and objectivity of media reporting in this COVID era. So we all know that on March 11, the Director General of WHO declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. He also added that pandemic is not just a word to use lightly or carelessly. It's such a word that if misused can cause unreasonable fear and also can lead to huge death and suffering. And this current worldwide scenario now is showing the exact reflection of what the Director General of WHO said. So our presentation depicts what tone and tenor the journalists are using these days, whether they are being subjective or objective in sense while reporting news about COVID-19. Next.
As the topic goes, we are discussing about subjectivity and objectivity of media reporting. The first slide is about objectivity and media reporting. The copybook concept of objectivity itself is an integrated phenomenon which talks about insight, truth, unbiased, and transparency. While reflected upon media reporting, it notes certain qualities that reflect, as we have already mentioned here, no favoritism, like dislike or dislike of the reporter or the media house is not supposed to be reflected upon that news article. It wouldn't be something that is influenced by ideas, belief, or prejudice. It should be completely uninfluenced. Just the truth, the facts, just simply the facts. And some may note today that the old school journalism, which talks about he said and she said journalism, where there is no interpretation of data by the journalist or the media house. And the very important aspect of objective media reporting is audience interpretation. It's not the journalist or the media personnel who tries to interpret the data, the stats, or the statements. It's the audience who analyze the data, try to decode the message designed in that particular media reporting, and develop their views and views and opinions. But living in a modern era where this objective reporting is a tradition, as mentioned by Charlie Brackett, who's the director of POLIS, the think tank of London School of Mass Communication, he says that a long tradition that journalism should strive to tell stories based on fact without a personal bias from the writer. And he also adds that that media reporting is becoming more and more subjective, not just the way it's being reported, but also the way it's being consumed. How subjectivity works, my friend will further say.
So next slide is on the subjectivity of media reporting. And we all know that the 20th century and the 21st century reporting focuses mainly on opinionated reporting. That is, whatever the facts are, they are being interpreted on the part of the journalist. They always contain a part of journalistic interpretation. Their reports are very personal. Their reports have a personal perspective and viewpoints. The news are being written with a touch of sentiment rather than highlighting just the facts and the figures. And in most of the cases, these reportings are done intentionally because people these days are much more attracted to these kind of news. News which are having an open end that allows people to judge with their own perspective are more popular these days. For this purpose, I have used two pictures in this slide. The one on the left side shows that people see news as a blind sees an elephant. Like a blind has no idea about what an elephant is. He or she judges the fact from the point that he sees. Like if a blind touches the tail part of the elephant, then he or she would say it's a rope. If he touches the leg part of the elephant, he or she would say it's a trunk of the tree. The very way news we, the readers, see from the perspective that it is shown to us. On the figure of the right, it is seen that a person on the right side is trying to kill a person on the left side. But if we see from the viewpoint of the media house, a particular place is circled and the news changes totally, where it is seen that the person on the left is trying to kill the person on the right. In a very way, news are being shown to we, the readers, the very way the media house shows. It contains the media policies, the house policies. And the whole total news is being changed. While explaining the reasons, I would say it's all because of the corporatization of media. And we all know that after the post-globalization period, news has become content. It includes facts and figure, but it's always include a individual concept, individual perspective. And moreover, with the emergence of social media, reporting has become a very open platform. Like, people can write, people can say whatever they want, and they can judge with their own perspective regarding a very particular incident or a very particular happening. Next.
Media and the pandemic. Talking about the activity of media is currently happening. This slide explains how media and pandemic is going right now. As we all know, whatever e-paper, blogs, or journals or newspapers we are opening these days, it's become a health reporting paper. So there's a lot of coverage of about COVID-19 affair, COVID-19 actions and developments. So newsrooms across the globe has made pandemic coverage more given utmost importance, and not just COVID, but COVID affected subjects as well. There is politics, education, there is trade, border security, overall livelihood, which is being affected by this COVID. And then the second thing is discussing about subjectivity and objectivity. A prime observation has been here that there is a lot of subjective articles which is very much subjective in tone, and even if it's objective articles, there's not only just 5W1 is, there's always a perception added. And the biggest fight right now presenting in this situation, as explained in the previous slide, the emergence of social media and social media reporting, it's very difficult for both the common people and the news media and the journalists to distinguish between the proper news and the fake news. And it's creating a lot of trouble for those who want to actually seek their news.
Please conclude. Only 1 minute.
Yes, sir. This observation has been done through a quantitative and a qualitative analysis of newspapers. My friend will further add.
So we have here used a quantitative analysis, and we have used a sample of 2 newspapers, one Wall Street Journal to depict the international platform and one Times of India to depict the national platform. In this slide, we have tried to analyze the all total coverage of news about COVID-19 in newspapers, both international and national. So from this slide, we can easily see that most of the news in both of the newspapers, that is international and national platform, covers much more news of COVID-19 pandemic than any other news. It is very obvious because this is a disease which has taken such a big shape, such a shape of pandemic. It is obvious for the news to cover such news. It is the responsibility of the news house, the journalists, the news personals to depict the severity of the pandemic situation on the screen, on the newspapers, so that we the people can know each and every fact, each and every figures, the losses incurred, the deaths, the cure percentage about the current situation.
The qualitative analysis further shows the amount of subjective and the objective articles.
Please conclude. Time is over. Please conclude.
Okay. Yes, sir. This slide shows the amount of subjective articles published in both the newspapers, which perfectly shows us that though we want objective reporting, in case of this panicking pandemic time, there is a lot of subjective articles talking about opinions and perceptions and views, which is currently not required that much because we want to know more and more about objective articles. And even if it's objective articles, there's always a perception or a viewpoint added. That was it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, both of Pritha Mishra and Sudeshna Khadar, for your presentation. Next one is also joint paper. Now I request Osmita Bhaur and Arpon Dotto Please present your paper. The title
Hello, am
of
I
your paper
audible?
is, yes, COVID-19 and its extending grasp towards the facet of gender disparity. Please present your
Thank
paper.
you for thank you for introducing me. Okay, I am Ashmita from Shimurali Shochinandan College of Education. I'm presenting our joint paper by me and my co-author Arpan Datta. Okay, the world has seen how female population have always been the worst hit section in any social, economic or political occurrence. In this paper, we will analyze how COVID-19 is extending its grasp to the facets of gender disparity from the perspective of women. We have taken into account 4 areas where especially women are facing the ramification of corona pandemic. The areas are social, uh, economical, academic and profession. Due to the limitation of time, I will be mentioning only one point from every section. Let's start with the first section, that is the social sector. From the beginning of the lockdown, there has been a steep rise in the cases of gender-based violence. As the result of the lockdown, people are restricted in their houses. Everyone is experiencing stress, anxiety, depression, and whatnot. Whatever the reason may be, facts say that the cases of gender-based violence has an alarming uprise in every state of India. As reports the Hindu newspaper, according to National Commission for Women, between 25th March and 31st May, 1477 domestic violence cases were reported, which is far higher than the previous 10-year statistics in similar time period. Uh, to prevent such a thing, government should have protection and support services for women survivors of violence. As the National Legal Services Authority, that is NALSA, decided on providing online legal assistance for such victims. A panel of women lawyers will be commissioned in every district as a part of this initiative. To reach every victim, NALSA is taking initiative to establish one-stop centers, that is OSGs, in every district. Now, going to the next section, that is educational. Due to the closure of educational institutions, students are supposed to continue with their study through online platforms. Now, existing gender-based digital divide will affect access to education for girls in this time. As stated by the Internet and Mobile Association of India, only 33% of women population has internet facility, where the number falls to 28% when it comes to rural India. So for female students, they do not have as good an access to e-resources as much as male students have. To resolve this problem, government has to take the initiative to establish several e-learning centers across all the rural areas of India. For example, as in West Bengal, there are common service centers or CSCs under National E-Governance Plan, that is NEGP. The government can introduce e-learning facilities in these CSCs so that the rural female students can continue their education. After the unfortunate matter of Devika Balakrishnan, the Kerala CM, Mr. Vijayan, has announced that some neighborhood study centers will be built for those students who do not have smartphones or internet. Now, coming to the financial sector, with the rise of pandemic, there has been a simultaneous surge of unpaid care work for household responsibilities, because we all know domestic helps are not coming due to the lockdown restrictions. And for the lack of balanced distribution of care work, the women of the home are supposed to do all these things on the top of her professional responsibilities if she is a working lady. Organization of Economic Cooperating Department, that is OECD, shows that Indian women spend 352 minutes per day on unpaid work, whereas Indian men spend only 52 minutes per day. These leaves the women less available for professional work. Even after this emergency is over, the absence of any alternative support mechanisms will compel many families across higher income countries to be confronted with the need of choosing to prioritize the highest paid job in the household, most often corresponding to men. Because let's face it, still in this 21st century, the gender pay gap is a horrifying 35% in our country, as stated by the Labour Bureau of Government of India. For this, we have suggested that government should introduce paid reductions in working time or work sharing for female workers with care responsibilities. And
To be very honest, this is the high time when the male members of the family can break the shackles of social role playing and come forward and take shared responsibilities for household work so that women can continue to work. Now, coming to the last section that we have in our paper, professional hazards for women. As we have often witnessed, there is a predominance of female workers in medical workplace. According to the statistics of World Bank, 88% personal care workers, 76% of health associate professionals, and 74% of hospital cleaners and workers are of female sex. Among these frontline workers, the list of contamination is very high. As stated by Howard Catton, the chief executive of International Council of Nurses, almost 90,000 health care workers have been tested positive as on May 6th. So the bottom line is, as majority of the healthcare workers are women, so they are at a higher risk of fatal infection. To save women from this professional hazard, government should provide priority support to women on the front line by, for instance, ensuring access to adapted protective equipment such as hygiene products and COVID-19 testing when necessary, or arrangement for those with care responsibilities. Examples from India show that women's self-help groups are playing a key role in meeting shortfalls in masks, sanitizers, and protective equipment, running community kitchens, fighting misinformation, and even providing banking and financial solutions to far-flung communities. Moreover, women's SHGs, that is self-help groups, are being supported by Government of India's National Rural Livelihood Mission, which is NRLM, which is co-financed by the World Bank. So initiatives are being taken. To conclude, it is true that in this terrible situation, our whole focus should be on arming ourselves for the battle against this pandemic. And of course, we are doing so. At the same time, we need to understand that a battle is not won only by counting how many patients we are saving from the jaws of COVID-19, but also by preserving what we have at any cost. Though we have provided with some plausible suggestions in our paper, yet in this vast and unpopulated country like India, fluent implementation of these tenable propositions is a very hard nut to crack. So we can only aspire that for the sake of this appalling situation, the whole nation will work together as a whole and will surely find a way to sort it out. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ashmita, for presenting a nice paper, but I will come back to you while commenting on many of the papers. Okay, Subroto.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you, thank you.
The next one is Mrs. Somdatta Bhattacharya, research scholar, Assam University, Silchar. Please, Mrs. Bhattacharya, present your paper on gender dynamics and COVID-19.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, please continue.
Okay. The name of my paper is Gender Dynamics and COVID-19. We all are well equipped with and terrified by the term COVID-19, and due to this, the past few months have been really very tough for all of us. We had to learn new ideas, and we have to learn concepts and adapt new ways in our dealing, associations, and mingling with people. The coronavirus pandemic is not only a medical issue, but one of that which has both social and economic impact, and which will be very global and very prolonged, and its impact would be on the world for a considerable period of time. The pandemic is affecting both men and women, but due to the structure of our society, it is affecting the women more. So basically, I'll be talking about different aspects of this pandemic and how it is affecting the women. So how lockdown or self-quarantine is affecting women. Due to the lockdowns and self-quarantine, the work pressure of women is increased considerably. People are homebound for an extensive period of time, and we still consider women to take care of everything. Reports are of the opinion that Indian women do 6 hours of work unpaid. In contrast, Indian men spend spend less than an hour doing the same or average. This is the report which talks about the normal scenario. So when in the normal times women are working more than the men, so even when it is pandemic and it's the lockdown period, we can simply imagine how much women are facing or how much work they have to do. Another thing, during the crisis, that taking care of children poses further challenges to the working parents. schools and daycare centers are closed, and households are also not available. And in such a situation, mothers have become the go-to place. And in this period, women are victims of domestic violence. In the tough time when all are in home, women and girls who are suffering from having abusive relationship are more at the danger of intimate partner abuse and other forms of domestic violence. Unfortunately, home is not a safe place for everybody. Here I would like to mention the short film made by Nandita Das named Listen to Her on Domestic Violence during the pandemic. After the viral outbreak, many countries across the world reported a rise in cases of domestic violence and other related issues. In India, since the national lockdown started, the National Commission for Women has brought up the issue about a growing number of cases of domestic violence. Many online helpline numbers have made available to reach out to the victims. And one of the worst impact of this lockdown is also that the husbands or the male members of the family who are addicted to intoxicants are not getting the supply. With liquor shops closed and men not getting to drink, violence increases. Reports have been published in national newspapers saying that in Kerala, one of the members of the state's Women Commission got a call from Chennai pleading for help by a man, said that her sister, along with her daughter, residents of Idukki districts, are hiding in forest as her sister's husband has ejected both of them out of the house. The man said that there were wild animals in jungle. Another case happened in Chennai where Parvati, a 25-year-old woman, was severely beaten by her alcoholic husband. Earlier, when he used to beat her, she would run outside the narrow lanes to call for help from neighbors. This strategy normally in normal situation works, but during the pandemic or during the lockdown, she could not move out, and thus she became the victim of even more beating. Domestic violence is rooted in power and control. Further, the lockdown is adding to this marginalization. Another very important point is that since women have to take care of their work life, their family life, the productivity of women has gone down severely. If women are into academics, they have to publish papers, they have to take classes, and at the same time, they have to take care of the children, because women are burdened with more and more household work. So, since my fellow speakers have spoken about the impact of COVID-19 on women and gender, so that way I'm really blessed that my task has been reduced. But if I need to end a concluding remark, then I'll definitely say that our goal should be care for the caregivers irrespective of the pandemic situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sundarta Bhattacharya, for your nice presentation. The last one is Mrs. Shreya Ghosh, teacher of Central Point School. The title of her paper is The Impact of COVID-19 on Migrant Workers in India. Shreya, please continue.
Am I audible?
Yes, please continue.
Good afternoon to all. First of all, I would like to thank for giving me this opportunity. My topic is the impact of COVID-19 on migrant workers in India. So first, in the first slide, I am talking about who are migrant workers. Actually, migration is a part of development. People who are moved from one place to another just because of better employment, better opportunity. They are known as migrant workers. They are mainly from rural area. The next one is lease migration model. Lease migration model created in 1966. In this model describes the push and pull factors which are actually reason for migration. Push factor is something that is unfavorable about the area that some lives in and is a reason for them to leave. Some example of push factors are low job, poverty, unemployment. And pull factor is a factor that attracts someone into an area. Some pull factors are opportunity, safety, better job. The next one is the number of migrant workers in India at a glance. Internal migration is the movement of people within a country. In India, there are generally no restrictions on internal movement. The number of internal migrants in India, 450 million as per the census 2011 report. In 2001, that was 300 million. It is increased 45%. Uttar Pradesh has the highest share of the out migrants, while Maharashtra has the highest share of in-migrants. COVID-19 and migrant workers. During outbreak of communicable disease such as COVID-19, migrant workers are most at risk in India. Transportation got stopped, factory, shop, all type of economic activities were shut. In this pandemic situation, they used all possible means to reach their destination. For many, walking is the only option. Some travel for a few hundred kilometers with their children and others with their pregnant wives. Challenges faced by migrant workers during COVID-19. In this pandemic situation, the immediate challenges faced by those migrant workers were related to food, shelter, loss of wages, fear of getting infected. Due to lockdown, migrant workers lost their jobs. Many of them did not have shelter. In this situation, impossible to run the family due to lack of money. So many of them suffering from depression and many of them committed suicide. Now come to the point, this lockdown period, many people lost their job. So here we see in this graph that employment went up to 24% on 17 May with 114 million people lost their job. We all know many migrant workers work in industry. For this lockdown, many of them lost their job. So, India industrial production dropped sharply in April. So, it is a big problem for the economy. Contribution of migrant workers to Indian economy. Total earnings of India's internal worker is around 117 billion, but at least 23 million migrant workers return home from urban. So Indian economy has dropped. But on the other hand, if we see rural employment, it has increased. Indian government plans to provide employment to migrant workers to some state. So for these migrant workers, bring the rural economy back on track. So the last but not the least, the condition of the migrant workers become miserable. Many relief camps were set up to provide food, shelter to them, which not sufficient. The government arranged for buses, booked special trains for them to return. They faced several hardships this journey. Many of them starved to death. Some were victims to road accident, rail accident. We don't know when the situation is normal. So the Indian government prescribed some policy to minimize their distress. So we have to patience and we have to wait for better time. Thank you.
Thank you, Shreya, for presenting again an informative paper. So, Subrata, we have come to the end. Is there anyone else?
No, sir. You just conclude.
Okay. So there are 12 papers in all. 7 of them were on gender issues. One on media, one on teaching learning, one on geopolitics, one on migrant workers, and the other one was on socio-cultural challenges. Now, many of the papers were really informative. Some of them were also by students of our university, students of Kolkata University. I'm really impressed by many of the paper presenters. Now, one pertinent issue that should be kept in mind while talking about any sort of paper presentation is, what is the title of the paper that you are presenting? Because the title of the paper should be explanatory. It should not be confusing, number one. Number two, time management, from the perspective of time management, one should not pick up so many issues to discuss, because whether you go to any national conference or whether you attend any webinar, there is going to be a kind of time sort of limit in order to present you. So you should plan out that given the time constraint, you cannot talk on everything. So I would suggest what I normally do is to restrict my paradigm. Like most of the presenters who have been presenting, from yesterday, they have a sort of specific dimension of knowledge deliberation. Doesn't mean that they do not know the other aspects. So I would request all the paper presenters, first of all, before thinking of presenting a paper, the title should be self-explanatory and it should reflect only that aspect which you are going to talk about. Now there is a paper on subjectivity and objectivity by two of our students from media department. Now the terms called subjectivity and objectivity in social sciences have distinctive meanings, right? When a participant asked a question to Professor Bottomwell about how objective, to what extent it would be objective, his answer was methodological. He was referring to science as being objective, and in the post-enlightenment era, there was so much of critique of objectivity because we now favor subjectivity. Subjectivity means what I think, what I feel. Okay, so many of the paper presenters who argued for the rights of women, they were subjective in the sense that they argued for the rights of women. So if you say that objective is scientific and subjective is not scientific, I think there is a sort of technological, terminological mistake that one is committing. The perception that you are basically saying is that media should not be biased, right? So by objectivity, you are meaning that it is reflecting the truth. By subjectivity, you are meaning that it is reflecting their own personal views. So I think instead of talking about subjectivity and objectivity, you pick up some of the terminologies which are much better in order to express what you are talking about. And many of you had so much talk about domestic violence, on this and that. We are talking about gender dimension. So in order to present the paper on a gender dimension, you must pick up many aspects of gender, and you may write a paper also on that. You may write a book also on that. My point is, don't pick up the gender dimension. It's a huge issue. You pick up a single dimension, for instance, child marriage, for instance, trafficking. And I must tell you, some of you have been referring to Women's Commission. National Women Commission is organizing a webinar on 12th of July this month on trafficking, and I am one of the speakers. So Women Commission is really concerned about rising instances of domestic violence, rising instances of child marriage, rising instances of trafficking, and they are purposefully organizing a webinar only on trafficking, not on gender dimensions. Okay, so you have to limit yourself in order to talk about, bring out certain new things. Now there is a paper quite interesting paper on migrant workers, and it came out, it presented data, 2011 census data. Yesterday, Professor Mitra talked about whether we have correct knowledge about the quantity of, number of migrant workers. I referred to certain acts, I referred to certain surveys, but I was also not sure of how many workers are migrants. Now you have a census data which is correct, but I must tell you, you should add something else, because since 2011, the census data of 2011 was collected during 2010, period of 2010. So almost 10 years old data. Since due to the impact of liberalization, during the last few years, there is a tremendous flow of workers from rural areas to migrant workers. And one of the reasons for which NREGA was implemented was to stop that flow to the urban, stop the flow of migrant workers from rural to urban areas. So if you can add to the recent dimensions, to the recent studies done on the estimates of migrant workers, just estimate itself will become a wonderful thing. So this is my suggestion to Shreya Ghosh. You work only on the one aspect of estimates of migrant workers, because you say it is 450 million, that means around 4 crore, but often people say it is migrant workers is more than 10 crore, right? But the government estimates as 90 lakh. Initially, when the government of India was asked how many migrant workers are there, government gave an estimate of 90 lakhs. But look into the number of workers who travel by bus and train. You just count those numbers. That would give sort of a good estimate. The second important point about gender dimension is that all pandemics, it has been correctly estimated by and argued by all scholars, starting with Michel Foucault, that during any pandemic, all cleavages come to the forefront. Whether it is a gender, whether it is a social fear, there's a paper on socio-cultural challenges, alienation, fear, mistrust, all these, subterranean issues in social life, caste, race. Look at US, look at Brazil, where the race issue has become a prominent issue. When the Mr. George died, was killed on 25th of May, the number of COVID cases in US was only 19,000 a day. 19,000 a day. It came down. But today it is again 40,000 a day, 42,000 a day. So there has been rise in the number of cases in US, in Brazil, in India because of certain cleavages that has come. The migrant issue in India is an issue. Had the migrant issue not been there, probably we would have controlled the COVID cases by now. So any pandemic has the potential to give rise to social and cultural and economic cleavages that are not seen in normal life. You might also discover that a real friend during pandemic is a person whom actually you didn't develop friendship. And those who are your earlier friends are not real friends during pandemic. That might be a reality now. So this is something that is happening. One interesting paper news that is being published in a newspaper is, women being victimized and physically assaulted while in quarantine. She was sent to a quarantine facility at midnight, and the person who was in charge of the quarantine center, he actually physically assaulted that woman. So there are dangers not only of workers, women workers working in the informal sector. We are aware of the fact that 85% of our workers work in the informal sector, and a large majority of them are women workers. Obviously, there is a very strong gender dimension of the impact of COVID-19 on women in particular, but there are also positive consequences. Many of the husbands are in fact cooperating in the middle class houses in particular. They are cooperating with their wives, they're cooperating with their mothers in managing the household. So the contrary forces are also there. That is not to deny the fact that gender violence is on the rise, trafficking is on the rise, child marriage is on the rise, discrimination is also on the rise, right? So far as the question of teaching learning is concerned, right, there are contrary views. On the one hand, there is a digital divide, but on the one hand, we are organizing this webinar, and it was not possible earlier. And many people could present their paper. Many people from different parts of the country could come and join. So these technological challenges were there. My argument is, why didn't we thought of these technological challenges earlier? Why I am saying this? Because I frequently go to my university where I also take part in the teaching learning process. All JNU students, whether he is an SC, ST, 4, rich, has a laptop. You have to have a laptop in JNU in order to study. Why? Teachers send their reading materials through email, through Google Drive, and you have to download those. You have to present your paper. You have to send your paper through email. If JNU students can do that, why can't Bardhaman University? Why can't Kolkata and Jadavpur University students do that? Now this e-learning process is enriching because you can download a lot of material, lot of dissemination can take place, which probably we haven't thought of. Now time has come for the government of India to think of providing free internet facility to the students. It is not a liability, right? Use a mobile phone for teaching learning process. So there is a pros and cons, positive, negative consequences of many things. There's a very good paper on geopolitics, and the paper particularly concentrated on the African thing. There's a huge politics going on. I don't know whether the the war that is Indo-China war that is almost on the rise, whether it is a political issue or not. I also don't know whether the political ruling classes both in China and India, they want the war sort of scenario to go up so that we forget the COVID and locate our attention only to this war situation. So there's a lot of political issues coming, particularly during pandemic, which probably Michel Foucault has said there is a rise of body politics and body power. So state has become important. State is manipulating. State is driving our attention to different issues which are not real issue in reality, right? So many issues being discussed, many issues, social issues, media issues, teaching learning issues, gender issues, issues of the female health workers. It is true. Many of the nurses who are working in Kolkata, more than 400 nurses, they have gone back to Mizoram, Tripura and Arunachal, all these northeastern nurses. So there is a huge sort of gender dimension. I would request all of you to concentrate on each of the paper, each of the topic that you are writing on, right? For instance, health worker, female health workers, concentrate only on female health worker. Write a good paper, and there are journals who are asking for papers related to COVID-19. So you get good opportunity. COVID-19 also opens up opportunities, like Government of India is arguing for Make in India. This is an opportunity for Government of India to come out with alternative technology, with alternative plan. So this is also an opportunity for all of you who can work in new liberal, sort of normal situation. We call it new normal. But while we talk of new normal situation, it is normal for me because I have a laptop, I have internet connectivity, but this is not normal for most of the people. At least 50 to 60% of Indians, this is abnormal situation. So they work in old normal situation where they have to go out and work. So we are juxtaposing two systems, life and livelihood. Normally they should be related. My livelihood is related to my life chances, and my life chances are related to livelihood. A person who depends on daily earning, his life opportunities are dependent on his livelihood opportunities. But we are contrasting this. We are saying Jaan hai to jahan hai. My jahan is dependent on Jaan, right? We should not contradict. We should not juxtapose these two things, life and livelihood. Because in India, despite so much of claims about India being a developed or competing with China, around 50% of Indians basically are under the poverty line now. This is being exposed. And many countries, racial sort of differences in the US, these are being exposed, right? The way China has, undermined human rights violation. The doctor who came out with the information, he was almost harassed, and he ultimately died. So the many sort of political and manipulative issues which probably the state forces would try to undermine, they are now open. They are not open. That's why Professor Bottomwell has correctly said that you cannot go with this sort of non-logic and non-science paradigm for long, right? Ultimately, the science will win. Ultimately, the logic will win, right? And ultimately, a kind of citizenry which is active citizenry, which Pritish Nandi has argued, active citizenry. All of us should be active citizens. All of us should think of what is happening, what should be my responsibility, what should be your responsibility. In this way, probably we can have a better future. My dear friends, COVID-19 is not for only a single year. Take my words, it is going to persist till 2025. The impact will persist for a decade. So we'll have to work seriously on the consequences of COVID-19 for years to come. We'll have to teach COVID-19. We'll have to write on COVID-19. We'll have to do research on COVID-19. So it's over to Subroto to finish it. Thank you very much for presenting illuminating papers. And I would request my paper presenters to think again on the issues that I have touched upon and write a brilliant paper and send it for publication.
Thank you, my sir, Professor Vishwajit Ghosh, sir, for your nice explanation, and thanks to all the paper presenters. Now it is the time for lunch break. Another two parallel session 3 and 4 will start from 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. And from 3 p.m. valedictory session will start with the first link. After conclusion or after the completion of the valedictory session, feedback link will be provided to your mail, and successful submission of feedback e-certificate will be generated automatically to your mail. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, sir.